Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Royal Photographic Society's Historical Group and this latest in a series of talks about collections and archives. And it's a pleasure to move outside of the UK this evening to Canada. So I'm going to hand over to Gilly Reid, who's chair of the Historical Group, who will introduce our speakers. And we will take questions at the end of the formal presentation. So please use the chat and we'll pick up with those later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Well, all I can say is thank you very much for deciding to do a talk for us, and welcome to the Historical Group series of web talks. I shall introduce you each separately. Kim Bell is the coordinator of the W.D. Jordan Rare Books and Special Collections at Queen's University Library in Canada. She has earned a master's degree in Library and Information Studies from San Jose University and a master's degree in History and specialisation in Book History from Queen's University. So she is one of our speakers tonight, and there is Robin Canham, who is a graduate of the Master of Art Conservation programme at Queen's University and specialises in the conservation of paper-based collections and books. She holds a Master's of Information Studies, Library Studies from the University of Toronto and a Bachelor of Arts English degree from the University of Regina. And Robin has worked at the Royal Saskatchewan Museum, the Provincial Archives Alberta, Queen's University Archives, and she was a Crest Fellow in Conservation at the Queen's University Library, W.D. Jordan Rare Books and Special Collections. Previous to her career in conservation, she worked as an academic librarian for over a decade. She is passionate about education and sharing her knowledge. Robin teaches a course in art conservation at the University of, is it Regina? I hope so, Regina, and is dedicated to making conservation accessible through workshops and outreach. She's recently founded Canham Conservation, providing professional conservation services across the Canadian prairies. So you are both very busy people. So welcome to us, and off we go. It's over to you now. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, Gilly. Thank you for welcoming us today. We are delighted to share with you some Canadian stereographs in the Jack Brown collection at Queen's University, and also the photographers who shaped how the 19th century saw Canada in 3D. First, a bit of background. Queen's is located in Kingston and was founded by the Church of Scotland in October 1841 via a royal charter from Queen Victoria. It is one of Canada's oldest universities. Queen's has always had a strong focus on history, literature, and cultural memory. And central to that work is W.D. Jordan Rare Books and Special Collections, where the Jack Brown collection now resides. The image on the screen is of Theological Hall at Queen's. The photographer is unknown. So we have a diverse range of collections that span from the earliest printed books to the personal libraries of authors like John Buchan and Robertson Davies. Our collections are centered around the extensive Edith and Lauren Pierce collection of Canadiana, as well as ephemera such as broadsides and posters. We also have a large map collection, many of which are now digitized. The undated photo on the screen is of a local Kingston family. It was taken by Sheldon and Davis photographers sometime between 1866 and 1900. So in 2023, the library received an incredible donation of approximately 12,000 stereoscopic cards from Andrew Hunt, given from the estate of Jack Brown. This generous gift arrived carefully packed in 59 boxes and 9 vintage suitcases. And on the screen is an image of the collection, really a striking visual reminder of the collection's scale. And in June of this year, we received an additional donation of over 3,000 cards from the Brown estate, also in suitcases. And this complements the stereographs that Brown himself donated to the library in 1978. Jack Brown was a meticulous and dedicated collector. He took great care in organizing the cards by location, photographer, and subject matter, so making the collection accessible and intellectually rich. The collection spans a wide range of subjects and geographies, including incredible views of Kingston, Ontario, and Canada, as well as scenes from across the United States and indeed around the world. In addition to landscapes and cityscapes, the cards feature portraits, botanical studies, geological specimens, and natural history subjects, really offering a vivid lens through which to explore 19th and early 20th century visual culture. It is quite literally a world in a suitcase. The collection is also notable in that it includes works by some of Canada's most renowned 19th century photographers, so William Notman, J.G. Parks, and William Topley among them. These were major practitioners producing widely circulated pictures intended for middle-class parlors across Canada and beyond. Notman and Topley especially were key figures in the stereoscopic movement, contributing to its popularity with their high-quality images. And their stereoscopic work allowed Canadians to see their country and the wider world in an entirely new way. And I should pause here to say that I am not an expert on Canadian photography or photography at all, really. I came to this material through my work on arsenic in book cloth and paper in the 19th century. And it was the stereoscopic cards mounted on arsenical paper that really pulled me in. And I hope that this introduction sparks interest and that others will be inspired to dive deeper into researching and writing about this remarkable collection. So the green mount on the screen does contain arsenic. And when you see green mounts in this presentation, you can safely assume that they also contain arsenic. Robin will be speaking more to that in her presentation. So let's turn our attention to the photographers themselves, and we'll start in Quebec City with George William Ellison. So Ellison was first active as a photographer in New Brunswick in the late 1840s before establishing himself in Quebec City, where he operated until 1878. And he ran one of the city's largest studios, producing both stereoscopic views and portraits that appealed to a broad clientele. And like his Montreal contemporary, William Notman, Ellison gained a reputation for offering really well-made portraits at reasonable prices, making photography accessible to the middle-class customers while also cultivating a market for scenic views. His scale of operation really set him apart from smaller independent photographers, positioning him as an early big player in Quebec City's photographic scene. When Ellison's firm closed, many of his negatives were acquired by Louis Prudhomme Vallée, ensuring their continued circulation and really extending his influence well into the next generation of Quebec stereography. So on the screen, we have an image of the Lower Town Market on a market day. And this is the verso of that card, and we have Ellison's logo and a label with the title of the view. And this card is the same Lower Town view, but definitely much more faded. And if you flip this card over, we can see it's on a pale orange mount. The design itself, the logo and the label, is identical to the previous view, but what makes this one interesting is the provenance. So you'll notice the stamp for the Treadwell collection, which gives us a glimpse into its ownership history. Treadwell refers to Dr. T.K. or Tex Treadwell, who was a well-known collector and an expert on stereo views. Here we have an image of the Upper Town Market. So the lower and Upper Town Market views were really popular with photographers. Okay, we'll move on to William Notman. So Notman was born in Scotland in 1826, and he moved to Montreal in 1856, where he quickly established a photography studio that would make him the city's most prominent photographer. Notman was also Canada's first photographer to gain international recognition, a testament to both his talent and his savvy business acumen. In 1860, he created an art department in his studio that painted backdrops and touched up negatives and hand-colored prints, innovations that set him apart. By 1864, he employed 35 people, and by 1868, he had expanded into Ottawa. His business continued to grow, and by the 1880s, Notman's name was on 20 studios in Canada and the US. One of the challenges with Notman's legacy and that of others is that it's hard to know which specific photos he took, as the common practice was to credit the studio rather than the individual photographer. However, Notman was a master of branding, and while he had many staff, he had trained them all. It was his name and reputation that became synonymous with high quality photographic work. And on the screen, we have an early view from Notman of the Custom House and Square in Montreal. And here is a view of the post office in Montreal on a buff-colored mount. And this is the verso of the post office image. This would have been an early image from Notman. His stamp or his logo there is very modest. And this mount here is similar as the previous Notman views that we've shared. This is a view from the tower of Notre Dame Church in Montreal. Here is an image of the Horseshoe Falls in Niagara, looking from Goat Island. Also an early image from Notman, and this one is part of a series. And what's striking is how often these photographers turn their lenses towards the same subjects. So we have Quebec City with its fortress walls and sweeping terraces, which offered a dramatic view. And the Victoria Bridge in Montreal, which we will see next, was a favorite subject. It was hailed as an engineering wonder and became a must-have image for anyone building a collection. And of course, Niagara Falls, perhaps the most photographed site in 19th century North America. So these were iconic landmarks, endlessly reproduced and endlessly consumed by a public eager to see them in stereo. So here we have an image of the interior center tube of the Victoria Bridge in Montreal, one of Notman's most famous projects, and the one that really gave him his start was documenting the construction of the Victoria Bridge across the St. Lawrence River from 1858 to 1860. And in 1860, he even produced a special commemorative maple box full of stereoscopic images for the Queen. So impressive, the story goes, that Queen Victoria herself called him, quote, the photographer to the Queen. Notman took this photo in 1860, as the back of the card says, for the reception of the Prince of Wales in August of 1860. Queen Victoria had been invited to attend the opening of the bridge, but sent her oldest son instead. And we also have a provenance stamp of Miss L.A. Field on the back. Her name stamped here tells us something important. These stereographs weren't just produced and sold, they were handled, labeled, swapped, and cherished. Each carries not just the photographer's view, but also the traces of the people who lived with them. This is a view of Champlain Street in Quebec. This image is post-1860. And here on the verso, we can see that his stamp has become quite elaborate. And we can see that Notman took the Queen's words to heart and has added to his logo that he is indeed the photographer to the Queen. And we have Ottawa, Toronto, and Halifax now included on the label. So here we have an image of a person on snowshoes trudging through a snowstorm. This is a later image as Notman has expanded even further into the US, and we have a date of 1876 on his logo. He is still the photographer to the Queen. As I mentioned, Notman was a savvy businessman, and it would have been challenging to take these images outside. So what Notman did is he created snowy landscapes inside the studio using cotton and painted backdrops, making use of the art department he had established in 1860. So his stereoscopic views weren't just pictures, they were designed to create an experience, to make viewers feel as if they were really there. And after his death in 1891, his son took over the studio until it closed in 1935. So we'll move on to Louis Prudhomme Vallée. He opened his studio in Quebec City in 1867 and soon established himself as one of the city's most popular stereographers. Known for his picturesque views of Quebec and its surroundings, Vallée marketed his work to the growing tourist trade, providing visual souvenirs of the province's historic capital. In this role, he became for Quebec City what Notman represented for Montreal, an essential interpreter of the city's landmarks and landscapes for both local and visiting audiences. Vallée also expanded his holdings, as I had mentioned earlier, by purchasing Ellison's negatives when that firm closed, ensuring the continued circulation of their images under his imprint. On the slide, we have an image of the basilica. Here we have part of the fortification in Quebec and some provenance information on the back of the card. It was sold by Pierce and Patterson of Quebec and belonged to Emily and Hayward Madden at one time. Steamboats were also popular subjects with photographers. Here, the image has been mounted, as you can see, on bright orange cardstock with the back of the card on purple. Vallée's studio remained active until 1901, leaving behind a substantial body of stereoscopic views that really shaped how Quebec City was seen in the late 19th century. William James Topley began his photography career as an apprentice with William Notman in Montreal, learning the craft and also the business of running a successful studio. He later established himself in Ottawa, where he became Notman's partner before buying Notman out in 1876. Topley was known for his elegant, highly finished portraits, which attracted both local elites and political figures, but he also produced and sold landscapes, catering to the growing market for scenic and tourist views. His work combined technical precision with careful presentation. And like Notman, he understood how to make photography both a business and a cultural product, really offering images that were as much about experience and prestige as they were about documentation. So here on the screen, we have an image of the Middleshoot Falls in Murray Bay. On one side, we have the Notman studio name, and on the other, we have Topley as the owner, which I think this slide has cut that off. That's okay. Here we have an image of someone fishing on the riverbank and two people in a boat. And on the back, we now have a stamp with Topley as the owner. This is an image of Rideau Falls in Ottawa with a bit of a fancier logo on the back, but he's still using the Notman studio name. This image by Topley of the Grand Hotel is an interesting one. It had been used as an ad by the hotel, and on the back, you can see there we have the rates for the hotel, which is being promoted as a spa, and a report that includes an analysis of the water content. James George Parks was a Montreal-based photographer, active from 1864 to 1890, as recorded in McKay's directory. His stereoscopic cards capture familiar urban and regional scenes, but they also serve as ads for his business, proudly listing the prizes he had won and marking the shifting addresses of his Montreal studios. The evolving award tallies and addresses make it possible to date his surviving stereo views with some precision, and reflecting both his professional ambitions and his mobility within the city's photographic trade. On the screen, we have an image of a French cathedral in Quebec. It is mounted on buff cardboard. There isn't much information on the card, and most likely it is an early one. Here we have the Mount Royal Cemetery in Montreal, mounted on arsenical green cardboard. And Parks here has added his address, 188 St. James Street, Montreal. This view of the Citadel in Quebec is also on arsenical green and is number 281, presumably in the Canadian and American Scenery series. Parks is still at 188 St. James Street. The verso of this card of the Citadel is also mounted on green, but it's no longer blank. It states that Parks was the photographer, and it also says that he has won 5 first prizes. And we can see here the blind stamp of C.R. Chisholm on this card. So a number of the cards are blind stamped, C.R. Chisholm and Brothers, linking his work with a well-known Montreal publishing firm that specialized in travel guidebooks and maps. Chisholm's distribution suggests that Parks' images were marketed alongside broader tourist materials aimed at travelers eager to collect views of Montreal, Quebec, and beyond. This partnership highlights the commercial networks through which the stereoscopic views circulated in 19th century Canada, and situating parks as part of a larger economy of visual culture that tied together photography, publishing, tourism, and perhaps unexpectedly, the toxic pigments of Victorian consumer culture. This is an image of Durham Terrace in Quebec. Some of the buildings, as you can see, are labeled. Parks is now at 195.5 St. James Street in Montreal and has won 15 first prizes for portraits and views. The verso is blank and is on the same color mount. And here, Parks has moved down the street to 197. He has now won 21 first prizes and is advertising on this card that he sells unmounted views, large and small, stereoscopic, and lantern slides of places of interest. The verso of this card is also blank and is on the same color. And James Essen was a Canadian studio photographer and publisher in Preston, which is now Cambridge, Ontario, who combined commercial portraits with an avid interest in landscape and travel views. Over the course of his career, he created hundreds of views that document both his travels and his surroundings, positioning him as an important figure in Ontario's regional photographic history. Now, on the slide, we have a card from the Glimpses of Toronto series featuring the horticultural gardens, which are known today as the Allen Gardens. This image is dated 1880. Essen did several series in addition to the Glimpses of Toronto image from the previous slide. And our collection has many of the views from his various series. And this image, called Love in a Tree, and yes, there are actually two people sitting up in that tree, is from the Among the Thousand Islands series. Here we have the bridge on Sport Island. This is a hand-colored image. And Ash Island, another one from the series, also hand-colored. These are all dated 1880. Essen left the backs blank on these images. And a different series from Essen, Beauties of the Earth. The logo on this one is, as you can see, much simpler than the previous ones. So in their own time, stereographs were a form of immersive media, sort of the virtual reality of the 19th century. Families would gather around the stereoscope after dinner, traveling in their imaginations to Niagara Falls, to Quebec, or even further afield. For many Canadians, these were the first images of their own country seen in 3 dimensions. They shaped how people thought about place, distance, and nationhood. And today, these cards are more than just charming curiosities. They are historical documents showing us how Canada was represented to itself and to the world, from national monuments to local main streets. They offer a layered view of Canada. They reveal a country that wanted to be seen as modern and monumental with its bridges and railways and cities, but also as picturesque and rooted in local communities. And like the provenance found on some of the cards, they remind us that history lives not just in the famous, but in the everyday traces left behind. So the Jack Brown collection is truly a world in a suitcase, a portable 3-dimensional record of Canada in the 19th century. It brings together the great names of Canadian photography, local studios in small towns, and even the imprints of private collectors who stamped their names on the cards. And together, they create a layered story of how a country looked and how it wanted to be seen. And it's often in these modest images that we see the texture of history most clearly. And that brings me to the next chapter of today's talk, because once you begin to look closely at these objects, you also encounter their material stories, their colors, and sometimes their dangers. So Robin will now take us deeper into that world, exploring what it means to preserve and work with these fascinating but sometimes hazardous objects.
All right, thanks, Kim. So yeah, as Kim mentioned, our work on the Stereograph collection actually grew out of an earlier project at Queen's University Library. And that project investigated pigments used in 19th century green book bindings. So specifically, whether the vivid green colors contained arsenic. And of course, spoiler alert, they did. But what happened was that the newly donated Jack Brown Stereograph collection serendipitously arrived at the library just as our project on arsenical green books was ending. And wouldn't you know, we immediately picked out that distinctive green color we found in the books in the stereograph cards and mounts. So instead of finishing a project, we started a new one. And we started by selecting a representative group of cards from the collection, since testing them all wasn't feasible. In total, about 70 cards were analyzed, and these included green, yellow, orange, bright pink, peach, purple, blue, and white mounts. And you've seen many of those colors in Kim's presentation today. And of course, sometimes they had different colors on the front and back. So we know there was a wide variety of card mounts with many different customization options available to photographers and their studios at the time. And in the photo on the screen, you can see Drew, a conservation intern from the Royal Saskatchewan Museum, who photographed and documented each card. Drew did much of the careful work of recording the physical characteristics of both sides of the cards. So I won't go into all the results and data today, but really it wasn't surprising. Every single one of the 15 green sampled cards that we tested tested positive for arsenic. And some green cards also showed levels of lead present. And these were usually the paler or pastel green cards, like the bottom example in the photo on the screen. And while we can't be certain, it's likely that the arsenical green pigment was mixed with lead white to achieve that lighter shade. And other colors raised concerns as well. So in the orange cards, lead was the dominant element. In the yellow cards, there was lead present as well, along with smaller amounts of chromium and iron. And in the pink or peach toned cards, these also contained lead, but we need, again, with these especially, further analysis with additional methods to confirm the exact pigments and elements present, as we believe those colors were likely dye-based. But this was just like a very quick snapshot from these findings. I'd point you to a detailed talk. Check out the presentation that Kim and I gave for International Stereoscopy Day earlier this summer. The YouTube link to that presentation, if you missed it, is listed below. And as a special bonus, I hear Denis had given the RPS a presentation earlier this year as well, but his presentation from stereoscope stereograph cards from the Brian May archive of stereoscopy. He also presented at the end of after us, of course, and I highly recommend his talk. So I don't know if Denise and Rebecca are here today, but hello. And he, of course, gave a very enthusiastic and engaging speech. So again, you can also find it at the link here. Oh wait, so why does this all matter? Because, well, we're really realizing that potentially harmful pigments appear across many parts of our collections, and they extend far past just green books. For example, the cabinet card mount on the screen here shows a decorative green colored coating that suspiciously matches the Poison Book Project swatch bookmark. And this discovery has also prompted us to explore the material culture of stereograph production and photographic card mount more broadly. We want to know, how did photographers source their supplies? Who was manufacturing these card mounts? Where did the pigments come from? And what did the supply chain for photographic cardstock look like in 19th century Canada? And as Kim mentioned, we are by no means photographic history experts, but as a former librarian turned conservator, I can't help getting myself into these rabbit holes, and I'm sure many of you with the RPS historical group can hopefully sympathize with me about these rabbit holes, because just as you start looking for one thing, you end up finding so many other interesting things. And this is just what happens with archival research sometimes. So I started into investigating Canadian stereograph mounts, like where would have Notman would have sourced his supplies, and we naturally turned to Notman and his archive, especially since he was one of the most prominent Canadian photographers of the period. But unfortunately, the Notman archives were partially destroyed in a fire, and it's challenging to trace his suppliers that way. So our research changed toward identifying the companies that were producing and selling photographic cardstock in Canada. And one strong possibility is that of Rolf Smith & Co., a Toronto-based firm founded in 1849. Thanks to Roger Vaughn, who shared supplier information about his Carte de Visite collection online, I was able to connect Rolf Smith & Co. To this trade. And as an aside, if you happen to know any other Canadian suppliers of photographic card, I'd really love to know if you could send me an email or throw in the comments if you have any background on that. That would really help my further research. And Rolf Smith & Co. were known for high quality printing. And this is just one striking example I found, which is a dinner menu honoring the Governor General of Canada. And of course, it's printed on a vivid and very suspicious looking green cardstock. And also, so looking closer to Notman's home base in Montreal, that brings us to Bunton & Co., founded in 1854 by Alexander Bunton. The company grew into one of the world's premier paper mills of the time. Any Canadians here will know Bunton & Co. today, now part of Domtar. And Bunton himself went on to co-found the Sun Life Insurance Company of Canada, whose current net worth is approximately $45 billion Canadian, or 24 billion pounds. And interestingly, Notman actually photographed Bunton, his family, and even his dog, which I, of course, had to include the photo of him here. And now, like this little buddy, of course, one photograph doesn't prove that Notman sourced his mounts directly from Bunton, but it does suggest a connection that's worth exploring further in the Bunton archives. And while we haven't yet found any trade catalogs from Canadian suppliers, we did come across a contemporary catalog from the A.M. Collins Manufacturing Company of Philadelphia. And it's significant that stereoscope mounts are specifically listed in their product offerings, showing how widespread and commercialized the market for photographic cardstock was, and especially for stereoscope mounts. And this 1886 price list was particularly revealing. Among the listings are green, double-sided mounts described as having been enameled both sides and sold for $6.63 US dollar per 1,000. So just for fun and to put this into a little bit of perspective, if we think about Notman's custom card mounts that were green on both sides with gilt lithography on the back, and add up the cost of these features and then adjust for inflation, Notman would have paid the equivalent to about 577 Canadian dollars in today's dollars, or for 1,000 mounts. So while more research into what the buying power of an average individual in Canada was in 1886, it does tell us that stereograph production was not always cheap. The mounts themselves represent an investment, suggesting that photographers and photo studios like Notman's were catering to middle and upper class markets willing to pay for the little extras and extra quality as well. It also underscores how material choices like pigment color and decorative finishes were a part of the business strategy, creating prestige for the photographer and market desirability for the finished product. So what we can start to see emerging is that stereograph and other photographic mounts are not just simple boring supports that only play a practical or functional role for the photographs to adorn them. They are complex, manufactured objects that reflect 19th century industrial practices, trade networks, and consumer tastes. By studying the pigments and materials used, and the evidence that's left behind by past distributors and owners, we can connect these objects to larger histories. Kim and I both hope to continue our research on the Jack Brown collection, as it reminds us that the simple little details of everyday objects can open up some really interesting stories. And there's so much to learn from this collection. We invite everyone to study and learn from it. So I'd like to actually end by offering a few suggestions on some further reading. These are just kind of fun, easy reads that if you are interested in Canadian photography and especially arsenical books, I've just got a few quick recommendations for you. So Photography in Canada, 1839 to 1989 by Bassnett and Parsons is a beautifully illustrated book. It mixes, images with stories, and it's just a really engaging starting point if you're curious about photographic history in Canada. And its bonus, of course, is that it's also available freely online as an ebook. Likewise, A History of Photography in Canada. It explores people, studios, and technologies that defined photography in Canada, early photography in Canada. And it's a great pick if you want to learn how Canadians connect more so into the global history of photography. Of course, we've got a recommendation about William Notman. If you're intrigued by Notman, this extensive biography, is for you. William Notman, Life and Work, again, freely available online. and examines Notman's career as a pioneering artist and savvy businessman. And here's my recommendation if you're looking for an accessible and very visually rich exploration of arsenic-based pigments in the Victorian era. Bitten by Witch Fever by Lucinda Hawksley is a fantastic choice. This book blends history and design and features reproductions of many wallpaper samples from the British National Archives that were found to contain arsenic and other kind of pigments that are not so great for you. And finally, a very shameless plug, of course, you can find our contribution to the field in this latest article, Toxicity in 3D, which highlights the pigment research we conducted on the Jack Brown collection related to the colored card mounts. So finally, thank you very much, everyone who made it possible for Kim and I to present to you today, especially Michael and Gilly from RPS. Thank you so much for hosting us today. And Kim and I would like to leave you all with our contact information. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or you have any good tidbits for Kim and I to take down our rabbit holes with us. And we're happy to field questions.
Thank you so much, Kim and Robin. That was wonderful and so illuminating. We've got, actually, I'm going to start with the question that's in the chat, if I may, because it's a nice addition to what Kim was talking about. And Jeanette's asking, how did Jack Brown originally acquire and organize such a vast stereograph collection? And were there any patterns in his collecting habits that surprised you?
Yeah, so I can answer that one. It appears that he acquired them through auctions and antique shops, private collectors. I guess it looks like from a wide variety of sources. We understand that he attended shows on stereoscopic views and perhaps traded them there or purchased them there. He organized them in these suitcases, and it did make them very portable. And we understand he took the suitcases to the shows. And in the suitcases, he has organized them thematically, geographically, and also by photographer as well. So you can find them in so there's not just one area that's like William Notman. There is a section for William Notman, but we've also found them in other sections, maybe the section on Niagara Falls. So there's William Notman cards there as well. As far as being surprised, for me, it's really just the expanse of the collection. He really covers a wide geographical area. Many of the states are represented. So he's listed all the states and then the cards that are associated with those states. The other surprise would be I haven't found any women photographers. That's a bit of a disappointment, but it could be because this is described at the collection level, and maybe I've just missed it and haven't come across them yet. But I hope to discover that in the collection. But that's a great question. Thank you.
And we're going to go over to Robin for the next one from David, who's asking whether you have any advice on handling cards that might be, quotes, dangerous.
Yeah, my advice would be for, well, long-term storage it's great if you could add the polyethylene sleeves to them. They're quite inexpensive. And then you can just handle them and you don't really need to worry about putting on gloves every time and things like that. So they are a little bit more of a long-term investment for your collection, but many collectors or many archives might have already put their stereographs in sleeves just as protective measures from handling and getting oils on the photographic emulsions in the first place. But if that's not a route that you would like to go down, then definitely just wear gloves if you can. If you don't have gloves, handling from, like the corners and things like that, and then making sure you wash your hands really, really well afterwards. Don't go from handling your collection to like eating lunch or something like that. Just make sure you wash your hands always in between whenever you're working with them. And I think that is enough. We really don't know yet the extent of transfer and things like that. However, in books, we do know that arsenic has transferred from pigments to neighboring books that might have been stored next to one another on a shelf as well. So, something you might want to consider is kind of like also organizing your collection a little bit differently and pulling those ones out and putting them in a special location or kind of storing them all together. But it really is just kind of a personal preference. And I don't know, Kim, do you want to talk about what Queens did?
Sure. Well, and I can add to that we always say don't lick them. Don't lick the books, don't lick your
Right.
cards, stay safe. But here at Queen's, what we did was we put the books into bags and we labeled them and we changed or added to the cataloging record that they did test positive because we did test the fabric and the paper and of the stereoscopic cards. So we know they have arsenic and there's no good amount of arsenic. It is cumulative in the body over time. But you would have to like eat your sandwich and then lick your hands or whatever, like touch your face. So there needs to be more research on that. It does transfer, but we moved them all to one area. So if there ever was an event where emergency services need to come in, they know where they're located because water does change it. So if they get wet, it can change how the arsenic goes into the air because normally it doesn't in a book. If it's dry, it doesn't. You have to touch it. But adding water changes it, definitely.
And
Yeah,
just as a
thanks, Kim. I forgot about the labeling as well. So, David, if you did have a collection that you highly suspect you have some of those green cards, then making sure you label it so that if others run across that they know the safety precautions as well.
And just as a follow-up on that, when you were doing your research on the toxicity, did you go back to the literature of the 19th century to see whether there was any awareness at the time of the issues around arsenic, particularly within stereo cards and mounts?
We did indeed. And they certainly knew that arsenic was a problem, not so much in the cards and mounts, but they certainly knew, and it's in medical books from the 19th century. There are cartoons about it. One is called The Dance of Death, and it's two skeletons. One is presumably wearing an arsenical dress, dancing around the room, and the pigments are flying everywhere. That was the 60s, 1860s, I believe that was published. So they knew, but it's such a pretty color, and the Victorians loved it, and it was really to sell things. So they knew, but maybe the people who knew, the doctors and that, weren't buying it or wallpapering their houses with it, but the people working in the factory certainly were exposed to arsenic at high levels. And I think there's really more need for research around that for sure.
Yeah, we
Um,
definitely take for granted like how much like these colors would have been completely new to the consumer market, in our in our world, it just seems like we don't really have, we can buy any dress in any color of the rainbow, but that really wasn't the case at the time. The Industrial Revolution really made these colors available to like a mass market, and they just became so fashionable very, very quickly. And they were, really in a lot of different household items. So yeah, as Kim mentioned, like textiles and wallpapers, we know in books and our photograph collections now as well. So um, I think they even put like it in candy wrappers. Like so yeah, they did definitely know though, and it led to some changes. I think legislation a little bit later on, but they did know, and they did live in denial for many years.
And just coming back to the collection, I suppose the first question is how can people see the cards and access them?
So anyone can come here and see them. We're open Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. But if you aren't local, we can share the finding aid. And if there's any that you want to see, as long as it's not like 5,000 of them, but we can take images of them and share them that way if there's certain ones that you're interested in. But it is open to everyone.
Okay. And then just a final question, I think from me, we don't have any more in the chat. So final question then, perhaps. I just wondered if you could talk maybe just for a minute or two about how historians and researchers have been using the collection and how they're trying to open it up for in their own researches.
Yes, that's a great question. So it's really new. The study of arsenic in books and paper is quite new. So I would say it's really just getting going, and that is what Robin and I are trying to do is share our research so other people know about it and are using it. We do use it in classrooms. So classroom visits, we bring it out and talk about it that way, and hopefully someone will be inspired to look at it that way. But I feel like I think it's well known in other museum items, dresses and wallpaper, but less in books and mounts on the cards. It's quite new. So I think not a lot has been done yet.
Okay. And the cards themselves, are they being used by genealogists and local historians and other people to explore the imagery that they show?
They are, with people coming into the reading room and looking at them. I'm not aware of anything published yet based on them. And we are also, as I mentioned, taking them into the classroom and trying to get interest that way. And also out into the community. I took them to an independent theater in Kingston last spring. They showed Arsenic and Old Lace, the movie, and I had some of the cards there, and people could look at them, and that garnered a lot of interest in it, but nothing published yet outside of Robin and my article.
Yeah,
Great.
we're really hoping that there's some aspiring master's students. I think there's so many master's theses that could be written about them, and even PhD work. So the possibilities is just endless. We just need to find the right people to come and look at them. So
Great. Well, I think that brings us neatly to a conclusion just on time as well. So I think we've had the right people talking this evening about the collection and some of the other aspects of the toxicity. So thank you, Robin, and thank you, Kim, for sharing your knowledge once again to a British and international audience. It's been very appreciated. And thank you to Gilly for arranging this evening. And we have recorded this evening, so we will make that available, and we'll also share links to the earlier talk that Kim and Robin gave, and share some links back to the collection as well. So thank you for that. Appreciate it, and thank you to the audience for staying with us this evening.